standing in the hallway outside my son's bedroom when my housekeeper grabbed my arm and pulled me sideways into the linen closet. I didn't even have time to gasp. She pressed one finger to her lips, her eyes wide and serious in a way I had never seen in 11 years of knowing her. Then she pulled the door almost shut, leaving just a sliver of light and sound. "Don't make a sound," she breathed against my ear. "You need to hear this." I was supposed to be downstairs greeting guests. My son was getting married in 4 hours. The caterers were setting up in the backyard. The florist had been here since 6 in the morning, and I had spent 45 minutes doing my hair. I was wearing a pale blue dress that had cost me more than I would like to admit, and I was standing in a closet that smelled like cedar and old towels, and I did not understand what was happening. But something in her face made me stay perfectly still. My son's voice came through the wall low and certain in the way it got when he had already made up his mind about something. "She's not going to say anything," he said. "She never does." And then my daughter-in-law-to-be, the woman I had spent 2 years welcoming into my home, laughed. It was a short, bright, careless laugh, the kind you make when something is so obvious it barely deserves a response. "She's 63 years old and she lives alone," she said. "What is she going to do?" I stopped breathing. I want to tell you that I had always known something was off. I want to say I had seen the signs and ignored them, that some part of me had been bracing for this. But that would not be true. The truth is that I had loved her. I had chosen to love her because my son loved her, and because she had seemed warm and funny and smart, and because after my husband passed 4 years ago I had been so hungry for family that I had not looked too closely at anything. That is the truth, and it embarrasses me now. Her name is Tessa. My son's name is Andrew, and on the morning of his wedding I crouched in a linen closet in my own house and listened to the 2 of them talk about me like I was a problem they had already solved. I should tell you about Millie first, because none of this makes sense without her. Millie came to work for me 11 years ago, a few months after my husband's first heart attack. I had gone back to work full-time. He was recovering slowly, and the house had become something neither of us could manage alone. She came through a referral from my neighbor, showed up on a Tuesday morning with a canvas tote bag and sensible shoes, and within a week it felt like she had always been there. She is 67 now. She grew up in rural Georgia, raised 4 children mostly on her own after her husband left, and she has a way of moving through a house that is so quiet and so efficient that sometimes I would forget she was there until I walked into a clean kitchen or found the laundry folded in a way that was somehow better than the way I had always done it myself. We were not friends exactly in those early years. She worked for me. I respected that line. But after my husband died, after the house got so quiet that I started leaving the television on just to hear voices, things shifted between us in a way that neither of us ever directly acknowledged. She started staying a little longer on Thursdays. I started making 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. We talked the way women of a certain age talk, about nothing and everything, her grandchildren, my garden, the news, the particular loneliness of a house that used to be full. She knew my family the way someone knows a family when they have been watching it from the inside for a decade. She knew my son. She knew long before I did that something about Tessa made her uneasy. She never said it outright. That is not Millie's way. But looking back now, I can see the small things, the way she would go quiet when Tessa's name came up, the way she found reasons to be in the kitchen when Tessa visited, nearby without being obvious about it, the way, once she said to me very carefully, "She asks a lot of questions about the house," and I had smiled and said that was just because Tessa was curious and interested, and Millie had nodded once, and not said another word about it. I should have listened to that one nod. The house had been in my family for 31 years. My husband and I bought it when Andrew was 2 years old and his sister was not yet born, and we had done everything to it. New kitchen, new roof, addition on the back, the deck my husband built himself over 2 summers, because he wanted to say he had done it with his own hands. When he died, I thought about selling. The upkeep was a lot for one person, but I couldn't do it. Every room held something I wasn't ready to let go of. It was worth considerably more than we had paid for it. That was just the market, the neighborhood, 30 years of change. I had never thought of it as an asset exactly. It was just home. Tessa had thought of it differently from the beginning. I know that now. The questions had started small, the way they always do. How long had I owned it? Had I ever thought about downsizing? Did I have a financial advisor? Was the deed still in my husband's name, or had I updated it? She asked these things in a voice that was light and casual, tucked inside longer conversations so they barely registered. I had answered them the same way, casually, without thinking. Why would I think? She was going to be my daughter-in-law. She was family. What I didn't know, what Millie had been quietly piecing together for months, was that Tessa had also been talking to my son. Not casually, systematically. She had been building a case the way you build a case when you want someone to reach a conclusion you have already reached for them. My mother is aging. The house is too much for her. Wouldn't it make more sense for her to be somewhere smaller, easier to manage, maybe one of those nice communities out past the highway? And of course, if we helped her with that transition, if we managed the sale, we could make sure she was taken care of and also be positioned to. She hadn't finished that sentence yet, at least not in front of me. But she finished it in front of Andrew that morning. I heard Andrew say, the attorney said it's cleaner if she just signed it over voluntarily, less complicated than waiting. And Tessa said, she'll sign. You know she will. She trusts you completely. There was a pause. I heard footsteps, the creak of the floorboard near the window that I had been meaning to fix for 2 years. I just don't love how fast this is moving, Andrew said. My heart jumped at that. I held on to that sentence. We talked about this, Tessa said, and her voice had changed. The lightness was gone. There was something underneath it now that I recognized as the voice people use when they are done being patient. The market is right now. Your sister is never going to agree to list it if she gets involved. We need your mother to do this before anyone else starts asking questions. My daughter. She was talking about my daughter. My daughter lives in Phoenix, and she calls me every Sunday without fail, and she had met Tessa exactly 4 times. I had always assumed the distance between them was just circumstances, geography, different stages of life. I understood now that it was not distance. It was Tessa keeping them apart, keeping me from the one person who would have told me to slow down and think. And my mom ends up in some apartment, Andrew said. He didn't say it like a protest. He said it like a thing he had accepted but not entirely made peace with. She ends up in a beautiful apartment, Tessa said. Fully furnished, no maintenance, people her own age. She'll be fine. She'll probably be happier. Silence. You need to stop second-guessing, she said, quieter now. We've been planning this for a year. One conversation with your mother, at the right moment, and it's done. I pressed my hand flat against the closet door to keep myself upright. 1 year. They had been planning this for 1 year. For the entire last year, every dinner, every holiday, every phone call where Andrew said, "Love you, Mum," before hanging up, he had been planning how to take my home. I don't know how long I stood there. Millie's hand found my arm in the dark and held it, and I am not ashamed to tell you that I was grateful for the grip because I was not sure what I would have done without it. Eventually, I heard them leave the room. Footsteps down the hall, the sound of the staircase. Voices becoming distant, and then ordinary again, absorbed into the noise of wedding preparations below. Millie waited another full minute, then she opened the closet door and looked at me. "How long have you known?" I asked her. "Long enough," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I wasn't sure you'd believe me." She was right about that. I would not have believed her. I thought about that for a moment, how often we dismiss the people closest to us because they are not positioned in ways we recognize as authoritative. Millie had been watching and worrying for months, and I would have smiled at her and explained it away and thanked her for her concern. The same way I had thanked her for saying the house was too quiet and she was glad to be here on Thursdays. I am not proud of that. "What do I do?" I asked her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You don't do anything today. You go downstairs and you act like you didn't hear a word. And tomorrow you call someone. I am going to tell you something about that wedding that I have not told anyone. I walked my son down that aisle. We had decided together, after his father died, that I would do it, that we would do it together. And I held his arm, and I smiled, and I thought about how he looked when he was 7 years old and had broken his collarbone falling out of the oak tree in the backyard, and had cried, not from the pain, but because he had been trying to impress a girl in the neighborhood, and she had seen the whole thing. I had held him then too. I had been the person he came to. I don't know when I stopped being that person. The ceremony was beautiful. Tessa cried at the vows. I watched her cry, and I thought about how convincing it was, and then I thought that maybe it was real. Maybe she did love him. Maybe a person could love someone and still be capable of doing what she was planning. I didn't know which was worse. I ate dinner at the head table. I gave a toast that I had written 3 weeks earlier about love and patience, and the way a family grows by choosing people as much as by being born to them. People applauded. Tessa hugged me afterward and told me it was beautiful, and I hugged her back and said thank you and smiled with my whole face. Millie was not there, of course, but I thought about her the whole evening. I called my daughter the next morning. I told her everything, all of it. The closet, the conversation, the year of planning, the attorney who had apparently already been consulted about the cleanest way to transfer a property from a trusting elderly mother to her son and his new wife. She was silent for a long time when I finished. Then she said, "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Do not have any conversations about the house until I can get there." She was on a flight 2 days later. I will not pretend that those 2 days were easy. Andrew called twice to check in, the way he always did, and both times I talked to him like nothing had changed, like I was just his mother, and he was just his mother, and he was just my son, and we were navigating the ordinary strangeness of the days after a wedding. It was the hardest performance of my life. Harder than the toast, harder than the walk down the aisle. What I did in those 2 days besides wait was call my own attorney. His name is Robert, and he has handled my affairs for 16 years. And when I told him what I had heard, he did not express surprise in the way I might have expected. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "All right, here's what we're going to do." What we were going to do involved something called a revocable living trust. I had heard of it before. My husband and I had talked about estate planning years ago and had never followed through, the way you don't follow through on things when you are busy and not yet old enough to feel the urgency. Robert explained it to me again, carefully, in the way he explains things when he wants to make sure there is no ambiguity. A revocable living trust would allow me to transfer the property into the trust while remaining the trustee, which means I would continue to control it entirely during my lifetime. It would also allow me to name a successor trustee, my daughter, and to specify exactly what happened to the property and all my other assets after my death. More importantly, it would make any outside pressure to sign it over legally meaningless. There would be nothing to sign over. The house would not be in my name anymore. It would be in the trust's name, and I would be in the trust's name, and I would be the trust. We also talked about the durable power of attorney, naming my daughter rather than my son, and about updating my will, which had not been touched since my husband died. I did all of it. Within a week, it was done. My daughter arrived on a Thursday. She drove straight from the airport, didn't even stop at her hotel first, came directly to my house and sat at my kitchen table and listened while I walked her through everything again. Millie was there. My daughter had always liked Millie. She reached across the table at one point and took Millie's hand and said, "Thank you for taking care of her." And Millie nodded once in that way she has, the way that means she received the gratitude without needing to expand on it. We talked about Andrew for a long time. This is the part I want to be honest about, because I think it matters. My son is not a villain. I do not believe he is a bad person. I believe he is a man who loves someone who is not good for him, or who is not good for his relationships outside the two of them, and who has allowed that love to take him to a place I do not recognize. I believe Tessa is the architect of this, and Andrew is the person who convinced himself that the blueprint was his own idea. I have seen this before. Not in my family, but in the families of people I know. It is a particular kind of capture that is very hard to see from inside it. So when my daughter asked me what I wanted to do, I said, I don't want to punish him. I want him to wake up. She said, then we need to be strategic about this. We were strategic. I did not confront Andrew directly, not yet. What I did was invite him to lunch, just the two of us, 3 weeks after the wedding, and I sat across from him at a restaurant we had always loved. And I talked to him about his father, about what his father had hoped for him, about the kind of man his father had been. Someone who made decisions slowly and carefully, who never let anyone rush him, who used to say that the thing about a decision you can't undo is that you don't get a second chance to make it right. Andrew was quiet during most of it. He knew something was different. He is not stupid. At the end of the lunch, I told him that I had done some estate planning, that everything was in order, that he didn't need to worry about me or the house because I had taken care of it all with Robert, and it was all settled and documented and properly arranged. I watched his face when I said it. There was a flicker of something, I can't name it exactly, something between relief and the thing that comes after you realize a door you were planning to open has already been locked. He asked a few careful questions and I answered them honestly, because by then there was nothing left to conceal. The house was in the trust. My daughter was my successor trustee. Everything was exactly where I wanted it. He didn't push. He nodded and looked at his coffee. "Mum," he said after a while, "I love you." "I know," I said. "I love you too." I meant it. Both things can be true. It has been 8 months now. Andrew and Tessa are still married. I don't know what, if anything, he told her about our lunch. I don't know what she understood or suspected when the planned conversation about the house never happened. I imagine she is waiting, recalibrating. People like that don't stop, they adjust their approach. But the house is protected, and I am not going anywhere. My daughter visits more now. We made a deliberate decision together to close the distance that Tessa had been quietly widening, and that has meant more calls, more visits, more of my daughter's voice in this house which had gotten so quiet. It has helped, more than I expected. Andrew came to Thanksgiving. Tessa came with him. I made the same dishes I always make, his father's cornbread, the sweet potato casserole that takes 2 days to do properly, the green beans that Millie brings from her sister's garden every fall. We sat at the same table we have always sat at. I watched my son eat and laugh and talk about things that had nothing to do with deeds or transfers or attorneys, and I thought, there is still time. For him, there is still time. I don't know how this ends. That is the honest answer. I don't know if Andrew will, at some point, see clearly who he has become and what he allowed himself to be part of. I don't know if Tessa will decide to move towards something honest or continue building the same structure from a different angle. I can't control that. What I can control is this house and who I trust with what matters and how clearly I see the people around me. Millie is still here. She comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, an extra day because I asked her if she would, and she said yes without making a thing of it. We have our 2 coffees. We talk about her grandchildren and my garden and the news. I did put her in my will. That was my daughter's suggestion, and it took me less than a minute to say yes. Not the house. That is spoken for, and Millie would not want the house, but something meaningful. Something that says, you saw what I could not see, and you stood in a closet with me and held my arm in the dark, and that is worth more than I can easily put into words. She doesn't know yet. I will tell her one day. Not today. Today I am just glad to be in my own kitchen, in my own house, drinking coffee that I made myself, in the home that my husband and I built and that I intend to leave exactly as I choose, to exactly who I choose, on exactly my own terms. That is enough. For today, that is more than enough. I keep coming back to the closet, not the conversation I heard through the wall. Though I replay that too, more than I'd like to admit, but the moment just before it, the moment Millie grabbed my arm and pulled me sideways without a word, with nothing but the look on her face to tell me that what was about to happen mattered. I thought about what it took for her to do that. She had worked for me for 11 years. She had watched me wave away her quiet concern about Tessa more than once. She had no guarantee I would believe her even after I heard it with my own ears. And she did it anyway. She stood in that closet and held my arm in the dark and did not let go. That is what integrity looks like when it has no audience. That is what it looks like when a person does the right thing, because it is right, not because anyone is watching or because there is anything in it for them. I did not have that same clarity about myself, not for a long time. I had let myself be managed. I had let the comfort of believing that my family was good override the small signals that something was wrong. And I don't say that to punish myself. I've done enough of that already. But because I think it is important to name it honestly, the willingness to see clearly, even when what you're seeing is painful, is not something that comes automatically. It has to be chosen. I had to choose it, standing in that closet in a blue dress, with my heart pounding, and then again every day afterward, when it would have been easier to let it go. What happened to Andrew did not come from nowhere. Actions build on themselves. A small compromise in who you are leads to a larger one, and then to a larger one still, until the person standing in front of you has made so many small concessions to someone else's vision of what they should do that they can barely remember what they actually believed in the first place. I watched that happen to my son in real time without understanding what I was seeing. I understand it now. And I still believe he can find his way back. That belief requires something from me too. Patience, a long view, the refusal to close the door entirely even when part of me wants to. There are 3 things this year taught me that I think about when I'm sitting in my kitchen in the mornings. The first is that being a good person is not a passive thing. It requires you to act on what you know is right, even when acting is costly. The way Millie acted. The way my daughter acted when she got on that plane. The second is that intelligence without honesty is just a sharper tool for self-deception. I am not a foolish woman. I had the information I needed. What I lacked was the willingness to think clearly about what it meant. Those are different problems with different solutions. The third is that it is never too late to stand up straight. I was 63 years old, and I had just heard something that could have broken me, and instead I called an attorney and called my daughter, and I did what needed to be done. That steadiness, the ability to keep going after the thing that knocks you down, does not come from being strong all the time. It comes from deciding in the moments when you are not strong, to get up anyway. The house is still here, I am still here. And some mornings when the light comes through the kitchen window just right, that feels like enough.